excited to introduce to you another homeschool high school graduate, Julie Johnson. Julie Johnson, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
Now, just so you know, for this recording, Julie is having a little bit of problem with audio. So we're just gonna go ahead and do the interview, and Julie, it'll be just fine. So Julie, could you tell us a little bit about your homeschool experience? What year did you graduate, and like life after graduation?
Okay. Well, I think like many homeschoolers, like my story has some twists and turns. So even like what year I graduated is hard to say. But I officially graduated in, I think 2006. See, I don't even know, 2006. And I graduated with like 60 college credits. So I followed Rachel actually and went to community college for 4 semesters. Yeah, so how I started homeschooling, I started homeschooling as a kindergartner or something when my mom, I think it, was still kind of new and hippie where we were, not as common. I don't even think she really had friends that were doing it yet. Very many of them, just a few probably. But, as we continued, we just met more and more people. However, when she started, she said the goal was just to teach me how to read. And then she would send me to school. And then I just kept staying at home. So I don't know. I can't remember the whole question, but I hope is there something else I should say?
Well, you have siblings. So your parents went on to homeschool your siblings. And the only reason why I know this story is because I've known Julie since she was very little. And when she mentioned Rachel, she's friends with my older daughter. And so I've watched you grow up over the years, and it's been fun to watch all the changes and everything that you took on. So you always have been homeschooled. And then during high school, can you tell us a little bit more about your high school experience? You said that you had college credits by the time you graduated.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you?
It's hard for me to even remember like all the, and from my perspective of it as still a kid, what actually went down. But I think like my mom just had it with me. And she told me, you can go to public school, private school, or I've heard about this thing called dual enrollment. And so I shadowed at a couple different places, including with Rachel one day. And I came back from like, the high schools, and I was like, I'm absolutely not going there. It's a complete waste of time. You don't learn anything. that was my perspective. I was like, you have to stay here all day and do this. But and I felt like at least at the community college, I was also getting college credit, and I liked that idea. I liked that the schedule was more flexible, so I wasn't there like 8 hours a day, and so I was just there a couple hours a few times a week, and I was getting high school credit as well, but it gave me time to do the things I wanted to do still. And it was actually, I think at the time it was cheaper as well than going to private school. So my parents were like, sure, yeah. And I think the only like the big concern I had was like, well, I'm just like 16 and I'm going to this, it was pretty big community college, it's a huge transition from doing like school in your bedroom or something to going to that. And so that was kind of like a rude awakening in some ways, because like I saw and did things but I saw things or heard things in class that were like a different worldview too. But I think I had been prepared for that. So it was just like a good experience in that way. Like I could kind of learn more widely and deeply, but also still be at home and save money. I don't know. It felt like a good thing to do at the time. And then my siblings ended up doing that too. And so it ended up, my parents ended up liking it as well.
And so, Julie, can you just talk a little bit about what were your other interests during high
Mm,
school? Because it played into what you did as an adult,
yeah,
after
yeah,
graduation.
yeah. I think I was thinking about that question, and I can't think of almost anything that I do now today that hasn't come out of my childhood. And that's probably true for a lot of people, but but I think, homeschooling just gave me that, unique experience where I could explore things that I was especially interested in. My mom had kind of this mentality of you need to try everything. I don't know, maybe because she felt like that would give us more variety and opportunity and whatever. So I think she signed us up for all sorts of things. And I tried almost every sport and I was bad at almost all of them. But I did play like a lot of soccer. I did a little bit of competitive figure skating, and I did a lot of music and like voice lessons and piano lessons, and just tried a lot of other, I mean, the list is endless really. But one thing that I got into as a high schooler was drama. And I did a youth theater program and would and do a couple of plays a year and summer camps and things like that. And eventually it became one of my jobs where I was a teacher. I think starting at age 16, they had me teaching classes and teaching camps and intern directing and things like that. So that carried into my college and my adult life. And so if I hadn't done that, it's like, wow, my life experiences would be so different at this point. But one way I could do all those things was my flexible schedule, because I also in high school started working a lot and I had like 3 jobs. I was very busy, and it's probably a good thing. I mean, to be busy, for me. And yeah, I got to, go to different kinds of camps. My parents would send me to like apologetics camp. It's like the nerdiest thing. You spend a week learning about different philosophies and stuff. And yeah, like just taking vacations with my family and lots of field trips. And the vacations were always educational. They were like half educational, half like nature stuff, which is also educational, I guess. But it was more like, we're going to go to museums and these historical sites or whatever. And then we'll also go on outdoor experiences. But I feel like that too has made me who I am. And now today, those are the things I enjoy the most still with my own kids. So yeah, I just feel like I got to dabble in a lot of different things. Whereas if I was in school all day or, just committing to one sport or one after school thing, I think my world would have been a little smaller. So I got to know a lot of people in different areas. And yeah, like Rachel was one of my friends, but I feel like just like little pockets of people everywhere. And that was good for me too.
And so once you graduated, and you think maybe 2006
Mhm.
from high school, you went on to college, and then you met someone. And tell us a little bit about like, what did you choose to do in college, and what happened after you got done with college?
Okay. Oh, so many things I could share. I don't know. So in my particular story, you know, my parents, raised me to, read the Bible every day and serve others. And we would often talk about Christians around the world. And I remember I was like sitting at one of my brother's baseball games, and I told my mom I was going to be a missionary. And I was like 15, I think, or 14. And she was like, okay. But I really hung on to that. And so when it came time to look at other colleges, transferring to other colleges, I already knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to go to a country where missionaries weren't allowed access. And I felt like that was my ticket in. So I specifically looked at colleges that would give me like that specific tool belt. And so I only applied to 2 and I got accepted to both, but I ended up going to Moody Bible Institute. And because I was transferring in, I only had to be there a couple years, like 5 semesters, I think. And the last one, I actually went to China and I lived there for the semester, and I did my student teaching there, which was another reason I chose this school. Yeah. And yeah, so that's where I met my husband, and he was in the same major as me. And but we had met before then too, and we were friends for a while, and then we eventually started dating and got engaged. When I came back from student teaching, we got married, and 2 weeks later we moved back to China, and this time he came too, and we lived and worked there for 6 years. The school where we were at is not there anymore, and so we had thought we would be there a lot longer, but we had trouble with our visas, and there was a lawsuit going on with it's pretty hard to run the kind of school we were running in this type of place. So eventually they had to cut losses, and it was just getting difficult for us we at that time had 2 kids. And I remember like one time we were staying the summer in China. So we weren't teaching, and often we would travel, but we were staying the summer there. And some of our colleagues who are nationals knocked on the door, and they're like, we need to get you out of the country right now. We were having a lot of problems at this point. And they're like, we need to get you out of the country right now, or else you're going to go to jail. And then who's going to take care of your kids? And so we lasted 1 more year after that. And then I was just like, I got pregnant with my 3rd, and I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. We thought about maybe going to another country, maybe another city in China where there was we would have more like safety or opportunity to, like, we were having trouble with our visas so much. So we even thought about going to Africa. We were looking into that, but they basically told us, that sending organization told us, you can't raise support for Africa while you're in China. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, true.
So we were like, we're going to go home. And now our life has just completely evolved into something new. So it's just, I feel like I've often just been on the ride of my life. Everything happens really fast. And,
So
and people often mention that to me, and I'm like, I don't
now?
know. It's just what I know.
Yeah. How many children do you have now?
Okay. So now I have 5. That's another thing. I'm like, I never really set out to have 5, but that's what's happened. So
And you said you would never homeschool.
And I said I'd never homeschool, and then that happened very suddenly.
I think Julie and I were talking about the day that she made this statement publicly, that she would never homeschool. How many weeks or months was it later?
Yeah, like maybe 4, and I had committed to homeschooling. I really held out, and I was like, but I knew, I was like, this is kind of inevitable. Like, I don't have to get into all the details, but I was like, we had no choice.
But you had the skill set. So, you know,
yes.
It sounds to me, and maybe you could expand on this a little bit, because you were homeschooled, what kind of skill sets do you think that it gave you besides exposure? Like, what kind of skill sets do you think that it gave you to help you navigate? You know, I don't know if people were picking up, but you were fairly young when you graduated college.
Yeah.
You're a really young 20-year-old going to another country.
Yeah, I can't believe I if I could go back, I'd probably like tell myself, slow down a little bit.
But it's like, those are the one things about graduating early that a lot of people don't think through, is that, oh, I'm graduating and I can't even buy a drink because I'm not 21, right? Like, and so what do you think that homeschooling did for you? What other skill sets do you think that it gave you to navigate these choices?
Yeah, well, in some ways, it's hard for me to put in words. Like, in some ways, it helped me to transition into adulthood pretty smoothly, because I don't know, it just like, I'm just thinking about back to how the things my mom expected me to do and the things she taught me to do were not just like about books and learning. It was also about life. And so there were some ways when I was 21, I didn't feel like I was young. And I look back and I'm like, that is pretty young. But for me at that time, I felt like I know how to do these things. And when I got thrown into being an adult in another country, very newly married, and there is that like rough transition, and our organization helped us as much as they could. They did a pretty good job, but I think like even my friends that were around the same age and also like just recently graduated would often call me for help about like, how do you make this food thing? I don't understand this recipe, or what do you like, just like everyday kind of thing. So, but because I was at home a lot and I was doing these things, it was like, oh, that's easy, just do this or whatever. Not that I'm amazing. I don't even think I'm amazing. So I think that was one, just giving me like life skills, maybe. I don't know if would have been in my personality if I homeschooled or not, or if it's, if I was born with it, or if it's from like my parents, or if it's from homeschooling, but I am kind of a risk taker. So there have been a few times in my adulthood where I've had to do things that I know I won't never done before, and I might not be able to do it. And I could possibly fail really bad and affect some other people. And then I do it. And I'm like, it's just going to happen. We're going to do it. And I have seen, and for me, that seems normal. I'm like, we're just going to do it. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to do it, and we're going to adjust and whatever. And it's going to happen, because that's how homeschooling was. It's like, we're going to figure this out. We might not know how to do this yet, but we're going to figure it out. And so I have friends that are like, well, how are you doing that? Why are you doing that? I'm like, why not do it? I feel like I have to do this. And even my husband, he only does things that he's really good at, that he knows he can do well. And so I'll be like, should I do this? Should I do this thing? And he's like, I wouldn't, but go ahead.
So it sounds like
happened several times in my life. And I'm like, now I see it as a pattern. And I'm like, wow, I think I'm not doing this by accident. I think this is who I am. But I don't know. I think that came from homeschooling. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Well, I happen to think that you're right. because what you're saying, that your parents gave you enough experience when you were younger to try. And if it didn't work, life didn't stop. So you wanted to try ice skating, you could do that. If you wanted to try acting, you could do that. If you wanted to try, and it just built up your self-confidence, because you knew life wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
If it didn't work out, because it's like, I'm just trying.
Yeah. I'm just going to try. Like one example is when we got to China, I walked in, this is my first time being at the school. And I think I started teaching that day as well. It was a little traumatic. Anyways, I walked into their auditorium and I said, this is a really nice auditorium. They had curtains, they had a stage, they had nice seating, they had a sound system. I was like, do you have a theater department that I don't know about? And they said, no, we don't have anything at all. And I was like, well, that's a shame. Can I start one? And they said, well, you don't have any money. There's no money in the budget for that. And I said, that's okay. And so I kind of pooled a little of my own money into there. But by the time I left, they were like a thriving department. They were doing huge shows and they were profitable. And so they were like self-sustaining. They were funneling into their next bigger thing. And I was literally picking sets and props up off alleyways and going to markets all the time looking for things and scrounging up students that never acted before and dealing with copyrights. And one of my proudest moments was I could not find, there's really no theater in the city either. Couldn't find anyone that made or that I could order backdrops from. And so I had a billboard company print me a backdrop. So it was basically a billboard, whatever you put on billboards. But I was like, yeah, see, we can do this. And there were lots of people helping too. But I don't think anyone was going to do that unless somebody took that risk. And it was a real pleasure putting that into the kids' lives. I had never had that before and needed it, So I don't know. I think who would have thought some antisocial homeschooler can do that?
And when you're making jest at the antisocial homeschooler, right? Because You were a very busy kid with lots of friends.
Yeah, but I think we hear that a lot. Maybe not as much these days, but we hear, well, what about socialization?
Yeah. And it's
You
really
can make it
interesting.
happen.
And I think that's why I wanted to interview you because, you know, you're a little farther down the road, graduating, have your own kids. And there is this little bit of a difference back graduating and being a homeschooler back in the early 2000s versus now.
Yes.
And there was a lot more identity that was wrapped around that you always felt like you were having to prove yourself. And so what part of homeschooling, like we talked about all the wonderful things, but I would even think your experience is a lot different than now, is like, where did homeschooling fail you? Or do you feel that there was a deficit in your, because you were homeschooled? Obviously, you don't feel like you lacked any social skills.
I don't know. Like it would be interesting to go back and talk to myself back then. I think I've forgotten a lot, but I never really hated it at all. And one thing I liked about it was that I could pursue my strengths a lot and do what I was interested in. So one deficit was that the things I wasn't naturally like interested in. I don't know if you can hear my kids screaming, but they're like, it's like gladiators or something, or I don't know what's happening. Okay, so
fine.
Anyway, so there were some things I just wasn't like naturally drawn to, and so those things became a big deficit in my life where I felt like even back then that I was falling behind. But because of the direction my life has taken, I don't think it's necessarily hindered me, you know? So like in science and math, I did the minimum requirements, and then I was like, I'm done. I'm washing my hands of this. It would be cool if I could study those things again and see if that's kind of the fun thing about homeschooling now, is like I'm getting to revisit some of these things and being like, wow, there's so much you can learn. So that's the one deficit, is just like dealing with my weaknesses. At the time, I was just like, let's do the minimum, and I'm not going to try to, you know, force myself to get better at this. So I wonder, like, what would I have done if I had like a stronger training in those subjects or something? I might have done something completely different, but I don't know. But it's different for my siblings because they all went into math or science fields. So I think it's just also my personality. And maybe one other thing is, like you said about maybe there was some stigma back then, like in the 90s and the early 2000s about homeschooling. I think it's become much different now. But not only was there that, but there was also, I always felt like I was the only one that looked like me that was homeschooled. So I was like an outsider from my friends that went, or family that went to public school and private school, but I was also felt like an outsider in the homeschooling communities because I was like, everybody looks the same. And maybe this is just my story. It doesn't affect anyone else or anyone listening, but it still affects me today, the feeling of being the only different person in the room, looking person in the room, and how that has. I think that was also one reason I went to China, because I was like, I want to go somewhere where I don't look different. And the super ironic thing was, when I was there, I was still different because they could tell just looking at me that I wasn't Chinese. They could tell by listening to me that it wasn't my language and my first language, and they knew. And so just that feeling of like, you know, I think if I had gone to public school or something where there would have been more diversity, I might have felt different about that. But, you know, it's always been that way for me. So that was another thing, was it just felt very insular. And I still see that today. My kids are in a homeschool group now, and I am the only non-white mom.
Okay.
So I would consider myself biracial, but I think sometimes I get confused about, like, what does that mean? So that is, I don't know. It's hard for me to put into words, and I don't know if anyone will take anything away from that. But it is something that that I thought about from a very young age.
Mm. And so since your children are in that same setting, they're homeschooled, the community's bigger, do you do anything purposefully to make sure that their culture around them, the people around them are more diverse?
Yeah, I would like to do that more, and I feel like in other things that we've done, there's been more representation of different people groups. This group is pretty small and new, and we also just moved here, and
Okay.
so we don't know many people, and because of also how things are right now,
Okay.
it's harder to get involved in
That's
things.
true.
So I feel like, yes, I need to do better in this way. It's always on my mind. Um, yeah, I just feel like this ambiguous person most of the time, and I think that's because for many years I thought I was white, even though I knew I didn't look white. I identified as that, and so just and then but also like having that part of like my dad's culture in our life and whatever, but not being able to go to like Korean school. Like my cousins spoke Korean and things like that. My grandparents only speak Korean. Like just having that layer, but yeah, I think like accepting that like how I look and who I am. I still very rarely see, in at least the circles I've been, people of different colors and that are homeschooling, and I would love to see that grow and grow and grow.
Mhm.
If you are, if that describes you, then just keep going for it, because like we need you, and you are um yeah, I think that it shouldn't just be an opportunity that one type of family gets. And I think maybe with the pandemic too, more people have homeschooled. We see more different stories coming into the
Yeah.
game. But yeah, for me, it was back then, that was something I was very aware of.
So Julie, this is your opportunity to give homeschool moms advice, because I'm sure when you were younger, you would have liked to give it a lot of homeschool moms some advice. But but now that you're a little bit more, you're an adult and you've lived this life as a homeschool teen, and now you've moved into being a homeschool mom. What kind of advice would you give the moms that are thinking about homeschooling high school or are
Mhm.
already in the middle of homeschooling high school? What advice do you have for them?
Wow. I mean, I guess there's so much you could say. Um, I mean, I don't know if this is possible for everybody, but just keep reading to your kids. I think that is a fun thing to do together. Go on as many trips and field trips and just exploring hikes or whatever as you can with them. Like those are the things I remember most fondly, is not like the book work that I was doing, but the times like my mom's like, it's off season or it's during the school day, let's go out. And yeah, so we would take advantage of everyone else is working and everyone else is in school. What can we do? And yeah, so take advantage of the freedom that you have. And I guess, we think about it often as like the academic side, but it's so much about being together as a family too. How many thousands of hours you're going to have with them in high school that you wouldn't otherwise maybe see them or be mentoring them. And yeah, I think too, if I could go back, or even how I homeschool now is, we don't really have a strict schedule during the day. That's just my style. And sometimes my husband, who is a teacher in a school, is like, I don't understand what you're doing. And I'm like, who are we racing? We're not racing anybody. And we probably do more school in a day than the kids who are in classrooms. So I just tell, myself too, like when I start to feel guilty, I'm like, who am I racing? Who am I comparing myself to? So just know that your family is unique in how they're doing it and the way your kid is and the thing they need. And do what works best for you and not try to compare yourself so much, even if it's like, oh, well, that graduate did this and this graduate did that. There's like a million paths you can take. And the cool thing is you're already preparing them for those things, and you might not even know it. When you have them help around the house or teach them how to cook something, or do some service with them, or just talking, being with them, advising them, all these things throughout life, you're preparing them for those things. And so I don't know, sometimes we think it's all about the transcript or the credits or whatever, where you're going to go to school, what kind of job are you going to do? Are you going to do this, that? But I don't know. I think homeschooling gives you so many more opportunities because you can slow down and really take in, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to push yourself in this way or that way? So,
well, I think for the homeschool parent, you're so afraid that you're going to mess up your children's future. Like if I don't get this high school thing done correctly, my kids will be failures and it will be all my fault. And what you're suggesting is beautiful advice. You're suggesting academics is important, but homeschooling is a lifestyle. It's what you're doing and all of the activities and I think I would love to ask you this question. Do you feel like, did it go fast now that you're so far past it? Because being a homeschool mom and my kids are now all older, it's like, what a blink in an eye, and I have adult children. It went so fast. Do you feel that high school, now that you're a little farther down,
sure,
so fast?
Yeah, I think that's true. I've been out of homeschooling longer than I was in it at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does seem kind of like a dream. And so the things that I still find joy doing today are things that I found joy doing when I was young, and that I was able to develop when I was young. And so I feel like, whoa, it has brought me joy in that way into my older years. And I think there's this quote, and I don't remember who said it, and it just popped into my mind, where it's like, how you spend your days is how you will spend your life. And so I don't know, I think we think about maybe just these goals being the big thing, but it's like these little moments that are going to make the difference. And I'm like literally preaching to myself right now because I've got these kids. So I'm homeschooling 3 right now, and then I've got my 2 little boys who are just running havoc all over the place. And I don't know, I'm so thankful that I get to be home with them. And being on the other side of this has just made me more appreciative for what I was given as a kid. So I'm super glad that I get to see them learn and see the light bulbs pop on. And even though I did go to college for elementary education, it is completely different in terms of how you teach and what you teach and where you teach. I mean, it's just a different ballgame. And so getting to do that with my kids it's been so great. I didn't share this, but 2 of my kids have special learning needs. And that's one of the reasons they are homeschooling. So it's been a gift for them too, because I think the only reason they are succeeding is because they are homeschooling. And so it's been a blessing. So I guess just, looking at your own kids in high school or whatever, just take time to make those moments count. And I can't imagine having kids in high school because mine are still little, but I know it's already going by fast. I feel like they were just babies, and now my daughter's taller than me, and I just can't even.
Just to kind of piggyback on what you were talking about, the time and it being a blur. I know as a homeschool mom that my kids all kind of, went off as soon as graduation. They had these lives and I missed them terribly. And I had to remind myself all the time that I got to spend with them that normal American moms didn't get with their own children because their kids were away at school. And it did bring me some comfort Like,
Yeah.
wow, I really got to spend, what a privilege
Mhm.
that I got to spend with my children all that time. And that's what you're saying now. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
approaching this homeschool thing, and I'm so grateful for the time. It's such a precious thing.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I think even though I pulled my daughter out in second grade. And so am I saying this right? Yeah. So in second grade, so I did second, third, fourth, and that she's doing she's doing fifth grade work now. And even that has gone by really fast. But I just think, I haven't done the exact math, but it's thousands of hours that I've had with her. When she went to school, I wasn't seeing her a couple hundred hours a week, or sorry, a month. And that really adds up. And, she acted more like her teachers than she did her family. She just forgot to play with her siblings because she didn't know how to anymore. And I just want to see what they have built in their little sibling, friendships grow. This is like one of the reasons I want to keep homeschooling. I want to see it grow into high school, into adulthood. And I tell them, like, these are going to be your best friends, guys. Stop hurting each other. I want them to just, have that. And so, but I think that's something homeschooling definitely gave me too, was like, I just felt like I could be friends, with my siblings and hang out with them. And that was precious to me as when I was growing up. And so I feel like, kind of like what you're saying as a mom, like that's precious to you too. And yeah.
Well, Julie, I could talk to you for another hour.
Yeah, I could easily talk more.
I do appreciate the time and your willingness to be so vulnerable. And, I think it's important for the homeschooling community to hear the positive things, but I also like, you're talking about feeling kind of like an outsider because of, the color of your skin, and that's an important message right now. And I just loved what you said to those moms, like, go for it, create a community and make it work for you, right?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. We homeschool parents love kids. So.
It's a friend. Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Is that your friend?
Yes, it's a friend.
She's
a friend.
Is that grandma?
I'm your friend.
No. I'm sorry.
No, you are
not supposed to
fine.
be out.
Julie, I do appreciate all your time.
Thank you
so much for being here.
Thank you. It's
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, little one.
Bye.